The first team representing the Prince of Wales Conference in goal from the Buffalo Sabres, number 1, Don Edwards. Playing defense from the Montreal Canadiens, number 19, Larry Robinson. At center from Los Angeles, number 16, Marcel Dion. Representing the Pittsburgh Penguins, defenseman number 3, Ron Stackhouse.
My memory of Ron Stackhouse is a really fine offensive defenseman. A guy who liked to jump into the play.
Shoots, scores! Stackhouse!
In high school, we still had playoff drafts. And, you always wanted Ron Stackhouse from the Pittsburgh Penguins, come playoff time for some reason.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kings legend, Bernie Nickel.
I remember more than anything else about Bernie that he was a handful. Every team had a couple, and he was one of them. When he was on the ice, you had to be ready, because he could do something special on the ice that might make you look pretty silly.
Bernie is one of only 8 players in the history of the National Hockey League to score 70 goals in a season, and he is one of just 5 players to score 150 points.
You score 150 points, you've got to be able to play to put up those kind of numbers.
Now we're into must-save territory for the Vancouver Canucks. A chance for Matt Duchene to win it.
Matt Duchene's skills are dynamic. They're off the charts. He can do things with a puck and his hands that very few other players in the game can do. Unbelievably creative and dynamic.
Matt Duchene scores! And the Avs are in the playoffs, and you can see they're all down to celebrate.
Well, I thought Cody was a great two-way player.
And here's a lead pass. Hodson with the room moving on the right wing. Slap shot. Scores! Cody Hodson makes it.
I used to say to him, Cody, boy, you better work your butt off there, and you get up there with Stackhouse and Nichols, right? So, it'd be great to see that. As a kid growing up there, what better honor to be recognized at the place you learned your trade at.
Next, I'd like to call on Walt McKechnie.
This is an incredible accomplishment to make the National Hockey League, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, because I'm a dinosaur. That's a long time ago. Cody and Matt are one of 750 people in the world that are playing in the National Hockey League. Do you know what accomplishment that is? And they're from this little community. It's just incredible.
When you get that small number of people, and yet you see so many players make the National Hockey League and make impact in the National Hockey League and have such long careers and storied careers, well, they must be doing something right.
There's various players that we have raised in this town throughout the minor hockey system that have gone a long ways in hockey. And it's hard to compare the numbers compared to other towns relative to this size. But I would say it would be we'd have a high percentage.
The number of NHL players born and raised in Haliburton currently totals 4. For a town of only 1,800 and a total population of just 5,000 citizens in the surrounding area, these numbers are quite impressive. Nationwide, Haliburton compares very well, easily in the top 2% when you compare an area's population to the total number of NHL games played by the people who came from that area. And, while a select few other towns may indeed have similarly impressive numbers, know this: none of Haliburton's NHL players are related or have the same family bloodlines.
5,000 people, and to produce 4 NHLers. It's hard to argue that it isn't anomalous. In fact, now that you mention the numbers, It does sound anomalous to me.
Well, I think there's two anomalies. The first one is that it's a small town that produced an inordinate number of players. But in the year 2013, it's far, far more of an anomaly. And I'll try to explain why. When people like me grew up, we believed that all hockey players in the National Hockey League had the Gordie Howe life. You know, the rural, poor background, come from farms, come from small towns. In Gordie's case, the neighbor comes over when he's of an age where now, if you hadn't started to play hockey, you wouldn't be given a chance to play hockey. Gives him and his sister an old pair of skates that they fight over, and Gordie goes on to become Gordie Howe. And this is the Canadian mythology that we cling to and still believe to, but it is dead. Believe me, it is dead. I went up to Kirkland Lake this fall. Kirkland Lake, in my time, seemed to produce more players in the National Hockey League than any community in Canada. At one time, you believed the entire Maple Leafs were from there. In fact, Conn Smythe himself used to say, no Kirkland Lake, no Toronto Maple Leafs. And so I went up there this fall, and they have a mural in their arena. And the mural has all the people who went on to the National Hockey League, 31 murals. On the ice was the entire gathering of the Timbits for the 2012-2013 season, 30. There were more people who had made the NHL than now play Timbits hockey in Kirkland Lake. No one from Kirkland Lake makes the National Hockey League anymore. So when you look at a place like Haliburton, which has that small town character, the ice goes out of the arena, they play other sports, it's an anomaly, even more so now than it was in the past.
So what is Haliburton, and what is it about this place that just somehow oozes hockey?
When you come into Haliburton and you're driving down the main road and McKex is on one side, a former hockey player, and Glenn Sharpley's Source for Sports on another, you know you're in a hockey town. And you go by the lakes and they're frozen solid in the winter, and there's kids out there playing ice hockey, they're ice fishing and that. I mean, Haliburton's like one of those places that's born to be hockey.
It's God's country, obviously, right? Like, how many lakes are there? How many lakes are in Haliburton? What, 100 or whatever? I don't know. God gave him 100 lakes, and you know, people obviously took the hint.
It's an interesting town. It's really what small town Canada is all about. People are very friendly. The facilities are terrific. It's a resort area, so it's vibrant in the summer. It's also a real hockey town. I mean, it's got that old school rink. When you walk into, you think this is what hockey is really all about.
One of the coolest things, I think, is just driving through Haliburton and seeing the rink and the murals on the outside. I mean, I've never seen that done anywhere else. I mean, there's lots of rinks you can go to, and they're very proud of their hometown kids that have gone on to the National Hockey League, and there's pictures on the wall or there's plaques. But I've never seen a place where they put larger than life-size murals on the outside, which is very cool, because if you just happen to be driving through Haliburton and you go right around the bend there on where the rink is, you would look at it and say, wow, you know, okay, I can really identify with this now. And you really draw the direct line between Haliburton, these National Hockey League players, and the fact this is where they came from.
So the question remains, why? Why this small town has such a seemingly large impact on something as grand as the National Hockey League? Genetics certainly are a factor. Without an innate ability to master the game, a player, regardless of where he's from, simply won't play professional hockey. But can his surroundings also play a key role in a young athlete's chances of getting to the highest level? Can his actual geographical location have any meaningful impact on a player's hockey skills? Interestingly enough, in a rugged and very rural area like Haliburton, there seems to be a curious, inherent, and natural advantage.
I think one of the things they get to do that a lot of kids don't get to do in the Southern Ontario area is play in outdoor rinks.
You know, as a minor hockey coach, we would go elsewhere with 10 players, and we'd beat a team that had, you know, 3 lines and 6D, and they'd always say, you guys up north, I don't know what's in your food, what's in your water, you guys can all skate. Some of that's the fact that you have your own arena out on the lake.
The conditions just are right for it. You have long cold winters, maybe not as cold now as they used to be, and lots of lakes to skate on.
We always had that available for us. We could go skating probably all the time, where for the most part, people in the city, they don't have that availability to skate like we did.
I mean, kids who live on a lake can just clear it off and go out there anytime and have as much room as they want, so it's really special for sure.
I mean, look at Bobby Orr. He skated on the Seguin River in Parry Sound. I mean, that was his hockey. That was how, you know, and you talk to anybody who's grown up in that sort of milieu, and they'll tell you, I mean, that it was like you got out on the ice and there were 30 people out there. You had to know how to stick handle.
That's where you learn your skills. You don't learn your skills playing games. You learn your skills out on the ponds with other kids. When you got 20 kids on a 20 by 20 arena, you better learn how to turn and stop or you're going to get run over.
They're outside and playing a lot. I think that's important. Without supervision, which is hugely important to me, that doesn't happen as much in the bigger centers anymore. And then they develop their skills on their timetable and on their pace, and they can be creative without somebody telling them what to do.
Oddly, though, it seems that any advantage a hockey player in Haliburton might have often comes with a built-in disadvantage. Being remote enough to have hundreds of frozen lakes at your disposal tells you a lot about where you're located, and also where you're not.
Haliburton's always been a destination rather than a place on the way to somewhere. And if you look at a map, there's nothing much beyond.
What's unique is that we sit right underneath Algonquin Park. So there's no roads that go north-south through Algonquin Park. So if this was a hub and spoke system, our spoke is shorter than the rest and it dead ends. Because if you're in Haliburton County, you can drive south, you can go east, or you can go west, but you can't go north.
Although this geographic isolation might seem cute or quaint, it was in fact a major detriment to the development of many things in the area, including hockey. The lack of traffic through the village meant that Haliburton grew at a slower pace than other areas nearby. And while Haliburton did indeed have countless frozen lakes and ponds to play on, the first indoor rink would not be built until 1932. To make matters worse, it was strictly a natural ice surface and subject to the whims of Mother Nature.
I can remember playing in the old arena in Haliburton in February in the Glenn Dart Memorial Trophy event there, and the ice being water, you know, like just covered in water because there'd been a warm spell. So the ice conditions were very unpredictable, and there just weren't a lot of places to go because there were no artificial ice arenas around.
We were lucky to have ice by the 1st of January. It was a big deal to have ice between Christmas and January. And by the first week of March, it would start to water up, that it'd be getting mild enough to end. So the season was very short.
That's why we couldn't get into the Ontario Minor Hockey Association, because we didn't have any ice to play our games. We'd have to go away from here if we had to play anyway, because in February, you know, you couldn't trust the ice. You couldn't tell whether you had ice or not. We'd get a mild spell and we'd be gone.
For Haliburton, the hockey season was short, with a vast majority of its so-called home games having to be played on the road. Any games played in town, for the most part, were between a small collection of teams from areas surrounding the village, areas sometimes no larger than 75 people.
And every little town had a little, like a team, Eagle Lake and West Guilford and Haliburton. And it was, I mean, there was numbers, but the ability wasn't very good.
We didn't have a schedule like they do now and play a schedule and then go into the playoffs. We just had to put our name into the OMHA, and then we would get a bye, and then we'd play some team and they would beat us.
Haliburton's remoteness, plus its lack of a modern facility, kept the village, hockey-wise, largely within its own borders. While the game of hockey was expanding rapidly throughout the 1940s and 50s, with arenas being built all over the country, Haliburton lagged behind with a functional but antiquated old rink. That would all change in 1965. Haliburton, and the world of professional hockey for that matter, would never be the same.
In 1965 there, we built a new arena, and we had, that's when minor hockey really got organized.
1965 was a pivotal year for hockey in Haliburton. Artificial ice had finally made its way to the village with the construction of its new community center. This provided great opportunity to the area for two reasons. First off, Haliburton could now join organized provincial hockey associations with a full schedule of games across all levels of minor and junior hockey. No longer was the village that out-of-the-way place with questionable facilities that no one wanted to travel to. The collective talent level of hockey players in Haliburton was now growing at a rapid pace, and it wasn't long before Haliburton hockey started making its mark on a much grander scale. Within 6 years of joining the Ontario Hockey Association, the Haliburton Junior D Huskies won the provincial championship. It would be the first of many All-Ontario titles for this emerging hockey town.
That's the reason I think that hockey started to grow in Haliburton, because we had a successful team and we had fans that were following them. And all the young players wanted to be Huskies.
(1965) would also see Haliburton put on the professional hockey map in a big way.
I mean, it was basically the best of both worlds. If you loved hockey and you loved camp and your parents loved to get rid of you, it was perfect.
One idea would connect two future hockey legends, and eventually many more, to this small rural place.
It was a big event, really big event, and it was a great thing for Haliburton, really.
We had a lot of fun, and it was so well run. Ren and Jim set it up.
Ren, he said, I want to talk to you about something. And he said, I hear you're starting a hockey school. I'm thinking of starting one too. Would you consider at least us talking?
I said, well, I'm thinking of building a hockey camp, not a hockey school. I'm tired of hockey schools. A hockey camp that gives maybe 3 hours a day of hockey instruction, and the balance of the day all boys camp. He said, well, if you're serious, I'd sure be interested in coming in as a partner.
I mean, it used to be such an atmosphere for the whole community. The kids riding in from the camp, singing camp songs on the bus, riding down the main street of Haliburton. And
Haliburton Hockey Haven, Haliburton Hockey Haven. Why I remember those after 40-some years, when I can't tell you what I had for lunch yesterday, had to have an impact on me.
When the Haliburton Hockey Haven first came here, we needed a year-round arena. Most small towns in Ontario did not have year-round ice in the 1960s.
There was a bit of controversy there because, as I recall, they had to beef up the system so that you could play hockey in the summertime without the ice melting. But some people saw it as a great opportunity to promote, our village, and it was a great promotion.
The idea of a hockey camp was revolutionary back then, and because of the hockey connections each man possessed, it would soon have the players who would become the camp's world-class instructors.
You would be amazed at how many unbelievable hockey players came to Haliburton.
Bobby Orr and Ken Hodge and Ken Dryden and Bill Gasby was up here, and of course Johnny Bauer, Steve Shutt, Britt Selby, Mike Walton, Bernie Perrons, of course. I could go on and on.
It was fun for me to work with the kids, and work with the goalies and share with them a little bit of wisdom I had at the time.
How could you not love the fact that the goalie that probably was the best poke checker in the world was teaching you how to do the poke check, a move that I used an awful lot as a goalie.
The photo in the brochure had Johnny Bauer sitting at some, at the camp by the lake with some kid, eating a sandwich or something. And I thought, oh, this is the greatest place ever.
That was like the pantheon of places to go for a hockey school in the summer, but Halliburton Hockey Haven, Bobby Orr, Mike Walton, there was an element of mystery to it for a kid growing up in Toronto.
You look back from the 60s to when the school closed, look at the level of instruction. I mean, you didn't get that anywhere across Canada. I mean, there were hockey Hall of Famers all over teaching kids, how to hone their craft, so to speak. It was amazing. I was in awe of some of the instructors. I was thinking, I'm going to ask Paul Coffey for an autograph if this kid doesn't.
Like, it was just a huge, huge thing in the town, to have these NHL pros coming in here.
We brought so many NHL hockey players there that many of them settled there. Tons of them live there now. They just got to love the area and bought cottages and everything else.
You start listing all the people who have cottages around here, or and you include referees and whatnot. There's a significant number of people.
When the Hockey Haven came here, it just raised the profile. It brought in coaches. It brought in a higher skill level. It brought in a better arena. And I just think all of those things together put more focus on hockey.
It was a great atmosphere. It was a real thrill to be a part of that.
That was just something that was so unique and special. I don't think any kid will ever forget that as long as they live.
The village was welcoming a steady influx of NHL personalities, and now about to export one of their very own.
I just remember him being a really, really good offensive defenseman. I mean, here's a guy who had, I think, 450 points in the NHL, which is a good number. I think 3 years he had 10 or more goals. 1 year, I believe he had 50 or 60 points playing for Pittsburgh. And, a guy who played, I think, 1 year in the minors, played for Peterborough, played 1 year in the minors, and then had like a 11 or 12-year career where he never played in the minors again. He was a really solid player for more than a decade.
His days in Pittsburgh were unparalleled, I think, as far as his talent and what he could do. He was a big man in a smaller man's game.
One of the toughest guys one-on-one I ever had to get around. Like his feet were probably, it seemed like this big. You'd think you have him beat, and I like to put the puck in guys' feet and try and dance around them and stuff. And Ronnie was almost impossible to get around. He was just a real good, steady defenseman that didn't get a lot of credit for what he did.
The truth is, I never saw a real season live NHL game until I played in one. So I was from back in the woods for sure.
For Ron Stackhouse, back in the woods was quite literal. He spent his early days playing endless hours of outdoor hockey on a tiny rink affectionately known as Tag Alder Gardens, named after the abundant punky shrubs that surrounded the playing surface.
I lived there. I was there morning till night. I so enjoyed this hockey. I was like in a little dream world over there. I was Tim Horton, I was Frank Mahovlich, I was all these people. But I dreamed, but I really did not think that it would be possible.
As Ron continued to grow, so did his talent for the game. And as he rose through the ranks of Halliburton hockey, it wasn't long before he started to get noticed beyond the county's borders. In particular, the Peterborough Pete's junior hockey team.
When I first got invited to Peterborough's camp, I was absolutely awestruck. I couldn't believe guys could skate that fast. I gave every bit of effort that I could, but they had me playing for their junior B team, and I was going to university and at the same time, and I wasn't doing particularly well at either one. I just wasn't very happy with the setup, and I had decided that I was going to go talk to Roger Nielsen and say, look, this isn't working. I got to focus on school if I'm not going to, be playing junior A hockey. And it wouldn't have been 2 weeks later, they traded away their two best defensemen and got back one that wasn't nearly as good and a tough guy, and doors opened for me. And I went from barely making the team in Peterborough to 2 years later, I was, drafted 18th overall.
His future hockey home was an impending culture shock, to say the least.
Talk about backwoods. I didn't even know where Oakland, California was. I had to go look it up on the map. That's how out of touch I really was with it all. Like I really didn't even dream about being drafted. I just thought, oh, you went and played junior, and then you went on and did whatever.
His first year with the Seals got off to a dubious start. Despite a good training camp, Ron was sent to the minors, 3,000 miles away in Providence, Rhode Island.
First game at home, I'm skating backwards, one-on-one, fell flat on my back. The guy goes around me and scores. Well, that was the beginning of a really rough year. The fans did not like me in Rhode Island. And by the end of the season, I only played the road games. If I hadn't had a 2-year contract, I would have just packed it in. My contract was for like $7,500 or something, but I couldn't make that in Halliburton. And the next year when I went to training camp, I was in overdrive. And things went well for me again. And then that fate, that destiny played its role again. And one guy had a contract dispute, another guy got hurt. The first thing you know, I'm on a plane to Oakland, and doors just kept opening. I went from being the 7th or 8th defenseman to playing regular and killing penalties and power plays, and so things unfolded. And I wasn't that much better a player than I was a year before. There was just totally different circumstances. Oakland was a complete opposite of Rhode Island. Like, the fans loved me out there. Well, I had a great year, my first year. And when I started my second year, I was shocked because I got traded to Detroit.
Stackhouse would spend the next 2.5 seasons in Detroit before being traded to Pittsburgh. Here, like in Providence, he would once again face the wrath of the hometown fans.
Even though I had some, by my standards, pretty spectacular years point-wise in Pittsburgh, when things didn't go well, I heard about it.
He was really booed a lot in Pittsburgh. It was ridiculous, and really unfairly booed as well. He was just the guy that the crowd picked on, to the point where buttons were made up saying, don't boo Stackhouse anymore, which is, I've never heard of that.
Hockey fans could never reconcile the fact that this massive defenseman, despite the thuggery going on in the league at the time, played with skill and finesse. Being a goon just wasn't in Stackhouse's nature. That he learned very early in life.
Growing up as a kid, my mom was a big influence in my life. I can still remember her saying, don't you hurt those kids you're playing with, I'm not a mean guy. And, I just could never bring myself to go around and physically intimidate somebody as far as, a modus operandi as far as how you played.
Oh, in my book, he was definitely wrongly criticized for not being the tough guy, because it just wasn't in his makeup. And he played the game, and he played it well.
As long as we were winning, and I was playing well, it was manageable. It's when we weren't winning or I wasn't playing well, and there was some combination of those things that it got very hard to deal with.
Despite this puzzling lack of appreciation, Stackhouse would go on to become a legend in Pittsburgh hockey, 11th all-time in career assists, and 5th all-time in games played. And to this day, Stackhouse still shares a league record for assists in a game by a defenseman with 6. Of course, if you ask Ron, and if justice was truly served, he would own that record outright.
Oh, Pierre LaRouche, 50 goals scorer. I gave him the puck, open net. He missed the net. I can still see it like it was yesterday. I already had 6 assists. Well, they were actually cheering for me that night in Pittsburgh. They liked that.
Ron Stackhouse's achievements reverberated immensely back in his hometown.
His success just buoyed, the hockey feeling. Halliburton's always been a hockey town, but when that happens, then more people are more enthusiastic about the game, and that was what spurred it on.
1981-82 would be Ron Stackhouse's last season in professional hockey, but rather than being the end of the Halliburton era in the NHL, it was merely the passing of its civic torch. This transition, poetically, was marked by the only game played between Ron Stackhouse, Halliburton's hockey pioneer, and its newest superstar, Bernie Nichols.
I played one game against him.
One of Ron's last games was one of my first games.
He'd just been called up for a game or two, and so I thought, well, maybe I have to teach this kid some kind of lesson, you know?
Unfortunately for him, it was one of those nights I had the 3 goals in the 3 games, but
I was bound and bent that he was not going to score a goal against me, but he did. He scored 3 goals, and I'm thinking, this kid has a talent here that I wasn't even really aware of. I'll tell you, I was impressed.
To say that Ron Stackhouse and Bernie Nichols are close is a bit of an understatement, especially when you consider the geography.
Bernie and I literally grew up 200 or 300 yards apart.
every time he'd come home, I'd always go see him. You know, he'd always have a stick for me because he shot right-handed.
I still remember him as a scrawny little kid going around town, whipping rocks and everything. He loved sports, loved hunting.
He always played sports, didn't matter what it was. He'd pick it up, he always picked anything up and did it. And he was good at it. We just kind of knew that he was going places. He just had an ability, and I think because he loved it and it was such a passion that he just did it.
I can distinctly remember when I was in grade 7, there was this kid that sat at the back of the room, and one day he was yawning, and our teacher, Mr. Baker, came up and said, you know, you should be paying attention, school's important, how come you're yawning? And this guy said, well, because I was playing hockey in wherever, Beaverton or somewhere last night, didn't get home till 1 in the morning. And the teacher said, well, you know, at the end of the day, the hockey's going to end, but you're going to have to go through school and get a good education. And at that point, this young fellow named Bernie Nichols said, no, I'm going to the NHL.
Southern Scouting came up. He asked me, I was the manager of the team, I said, who should we be looking at here? I said, well, I don't know. I said, Bernie Nichols pretty good. So anyway, he stayed till the second period of the hockey game. It was midgets at the time. And he and I stood there together, and I never said anything. I just watched the game with him. And he said to me, there's nobody here, I might as well go home.
For Bernie Nichols, sport came easily. He had that classic God-given natural talent, skating at age 2, playing baseball soon after he began to walk, and he would become the starting quarterback of the varsity football team in his first year of high school. He came by his talent honestly. His father, George, excelled at both baseball and hockey. Some would even argue Dad had as much talent as his oldest son.
George was a tremendous stick handler, very smart with the hockey. He had so much hockey sense.
My dad was my favorite coach, my best coach. And I'm not just saying that because of my dad, he was. Learned how to take face-offs right in the living room, or right in the kitchen floor. And I remember that, we'd be scuffing it up and Mom would be mad, but my dad, we worked on face-offs when I was a real young boy.
It wasn't long before Bernie outgrew Haliburton. To continue this hockey dream, the idea was for him to live with family in Woodstock and play the game in a larger center in southwestern Ontario, where he had a greater chance to be noticed by hockey scouts. This move would take him 4 hours away from his home and a world away from the outdoor lifestyle he so dearly loved.
No matter where I went, leaving here was a culture shock.
Bernie was, you know, he's a Guildford boy. The bush and the small town is bred in him. And almost all of Bernie's friends ended up, you know, living and staying in this area. For him, to have taken the path when he went down to live with his uncle to play Junior B down in Woodstock, he was charting a new path.
I left home when I was 16, so I lost out a lot of hunting.
The hunting and the fishing and stuff is just, that's another passion that he had, but he gave that up to do the one that he really loves was with the hockey.
A year in Woodstock led to playing Tier 2 in North York and then eventually into the Ontario Hockey League with the Kingston Canadians. Bernie went from being 350 kilometers southwest of his family in Woodstock to 350 kilometers southeast of them in Kingston. Of course, this distance wasn't about to deter the Nichols family from watching their son pursue his dream.
After Dad was done work and we were done school and we would go and we'd get a hotel and you'd stay and you'd visit with him Friday night and Saturday and see the game on Saturday, and then you'd come back home on Sunday. But we always went, you know, and like it didn't matter. You just wanted to be a part of it, and he always made us a part of it.
After 2 record-setting seasons in Kingston, Nichols knew the next natural step he was about to take.
You know, when you're young playing, it's a dream. And then you get to Kingston Junior A, which obviously the next step up is pros. So when you're doing well there, and then I think the reality sets in that, you know what, I think I got a pretty good chance of making it.
All that remained was the draft and to figure out where in the NHL he'd be heading. And as had been the case with these previous geographical moves, the next one would be a radical social change of the highest order.
I was at home. I got a call. I don't know if I got it or my mom got it. My dad was working, and they said I was going to LA.
Like LA, I mean, it's Los Angeles. Are you kidding me?
I'm not sure they were real happy just because of the time change and how far I was going away, but
it was confusing and fun and sad, because we knew that now he was going to be gone and not, you know, coming home in the summer like he was when he was in Kingston, or, you know, when he was in North York and stuff like that. So he was starting out, and we were going to follow.
I remember flying in, palm trees. When you fly into LA, you fly right over the city. It's really pretty cool. Just thousands and thousands of homes, you know, clumped in there.
For a self-professed good old boy, Nichols took to the glamorous California lifestyle quite easily.
Bernie Nichols, when I first heard about him, I believe he was playing for the North York Rangers Junior A team. And the next thing you know, we've got this flamboyant guy who kind of burst on the scene that a lot of people weren't aware of. And he's wearing fur coats, and he's doing the pumpernickel, and he's putting huge numbers on the board, and he's just being a flamboyant guy. And then you find out he's from West Guilford, this little wee town near Haliburton.
When you think of Bernie Nichols, a couple things come to mind. As you think of the guy who put up some tremendous numbers offensively, and then I can always see him in a pink suit with the full-length fur coat. He was a character.
I remember seeing him in the dressing room. The suits he wore, holy mackerel. That's where they plugged them in.
The thing about Bernie is coming from such a small town like Haliburton, that Bernie was like a movie star. Bernie, we lived with a family that owned a fur store in the wintertime and a drive-in in the summertime, and Bernie was one of the first ones to wear a full-length coyote coat with a big puffy collar, and when he got a signing bonus from the LA Kings, he couldn't get to the dealership quick enough to buy a brand new Trans Am. So are you picturing this? Fur coat, collar, and brand new Trans Am. From Haliburton? Are you kidding me?
He was the guy who was out and about, seen, and really, took advantage, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Took advantage of the fact that his goal scoring made him a celebrity, and he enjoyed that. I mean, he was made for both of those cities, LA and New York, when he played there. That's what I remember about him.
Was it ever evident that he was a country bumpkin at heart? Did that ever come out?
Ever evident then?
Yeah.
Have you seen the way he dresses now? You can't take the Haliburton out of Bernie Nichols.
Melbourne Forest, wildlife. We're heading to a camp. Sleep over there.
We're at the...
Is that a partridge right there? Here we go.
He was very confident he was going to make it to the National Hockey League, and not just make it to the National Hockey League, that he was going to be an impact player.
Well, I can recall standing in the net with my legs closed, and he would shoot the puck right at me, and it would go in. And I never knew how he did it, but he could turn the puck on its side, he could put the puck on an angle, and he needed very little space to make you look very much human.
Didn't seem to be able to skate very well. Didn't seem very fast. Bang, the puck's in the net. Bang, the puck's in the net. The puck's in the net. The puck's in the net. He scored at such a prolific rate.
He would juke almost with the puck. I mean, he didn't do it with great skating, but he did it with a great ability with feints and moves and dekes, and just a wonderful ability to control the pace of a game, and a great goal scorer. He was a terrific goal scorer.
I scored a goal in '89, and I told my daughter, I said, you know, I scored more goals in 1 year than any LA King player's ever done. And she said, is that the year you played with Wayne Gretzky?
That was remarkable, that first season when Gretzky got there. 150 points. I mean, 70 goals, 80 assists. Only 18 fewer than Wayne Gretzky that year.
I mean, you think about that in any quantified way of any era. I don't care, you know, how bad the goaltending was. I don't care how open the game might have been. 70 goals is 70 goals.
To put that season into perspective, only 8 players have ever scored 70 or more goals in one NHL season, and only 5 players in the entire history of the league have ever scored 150 or more points in a single season. While some of this certainly can be attributed to sharing power play time with the most prolific point producer in NHL history, Nichols and Gretzky centered separate lines during their short time together in LA. And although 70 goals and 150 points were high watermarks for Nichols, he also had seasons of 112, 100, 97, and 95 points before and after the Great One. In total, Bernie Nichols would collect 1,209 points in 1,127 games. He ranks 43rd all-time in career points and 31st in career points per game. Numbers like these naturally lead to questions about the Hockey Hall of Fame and whether Bernie Nichols deserves to be there.
I've got a book at home, and I check it all the time. Once or twice a week, there'll be a name come up that somebody's going in the Hall of Fame, and I'll say, why in the heck isn't Bernie in the Hall of Fame?
Unfortunately for Bernie, he played in an era when a lot of goals were scored, and I don't want to say it devalues what he did offensively, but I think there are a lot of guys in that same boat.
That process is sometimes an awkward one. It depends on what the graduating classes or the eligibility classes are. It comes in different waves, but I think he's a guy that's very much deserving of consideration.
To me, to be a Hall of Famer, you need to be a dominant player for a year, 2 or 3. You need awards, you need All-Stars. You need some of those credentials, and most of the Hall of Famers have them. Some don't.
If you look at some of the people that are in there and you compare it to that, absolutely. He's better than, I can probably name you a dozen guys who are in the Hall of Fame that he had a way better career than they did, and he was a better player than they were.
He's right on the borderline of is he or isn't he a Hall of Famer, and I'm not sure he's going to get in.
You get over 1,000 points, to me, you should be in the conversation immediately. It's not necessarily your fault that you didn't win Stanley Cups every year, or in some guys' cases, you didn't win Cups at all. It's more about, I think, your impact as a player, as a star, as someone who made the game better, and I think he qualifies on all those counts.
I would tend to go on the side of that he should be in, because he, for his time, was always one of the brightest stars in the game, and he was consistent over the years. It wasn't like he was a flash in the pan for 3 or 4 years, scored 40, 50 goals, and that's the last you heard of him. No, he did it for a long time, and if I were one of the voters, yeah, I'd vote to put him in.
Bernie doesn't really concern himself with getting into the Hall of Fame. He knows that decision is well beyond his control. What bothers him more was his inability to win a Stanley Cup during his playing days. Despite 17 NHL seasons and 3 conference finals, Nichols never won the greatest prize of all.
To be there as a player and not get it done, it's tough to swallow at times. You think about, I still dream about it. I still dream about winning the Cup, as a player, but never have, and obviously never will. But yeah, it's tough sometimes to think how close you could have been, or didn't get it done.
However, in what might be considered sporting poetry, Bernie Nichols would get another chance at winning a Stanley Cup. 13 years after retiring from the game, he would return as a power play coach for his beloved LA Kings. 2012 would see 45 years of franchise frustration and 18 years of professional strife come to an end. Halliburton's Bernie Nichols was finally a champion.
The ride you take, as much as it's yours, it's your family's too. And for me to finally bring that thing in and show them was really, really cool. I didn't do this on my own. It's because of my upbringing, my parents, the reason that I got to where I got to. It wasn't by me.
One of the things I like about Bernie Nichols, he played hockey with a smile on his face. He just loved to play, and he was happy to be around the NHL and in the NHL.
Well, I love the idea that he kept the child inside of himself. You know, do we have to be serious about a child's game? Haven't we got it backwards? Bernie Nichols had fun. Hockey's supposed to be fun. They've taken so much of the fun out of hockey, and now it's a wonder that Bernie Nichols could even exist in today's hockey. I like the idea that he had a smile on his face, because he put a smile on mine.
You know, I get criticized sometimes from laughing on the ice or having fun talking to people, but I was just having fun, and it's always been a game. It was never a job. You know, I got to go play hockey every day, and I'm just, you know, like a 10-year-old kid every day. You know, can you imagine going out in front of 18, 20,000 people and you're playing a game?
Both Bernie Nichols and Ron Stackhouse beat long odds to make it to the NHL. Of course, coming from Haliburton, where things aren't always what they first appear to be, at least to an outsider, trying to beat long odds is kind of a way of life here.
Haliburton County would certainly have one of the lowest average household incomes in Ontario. So if you're a kid going to high school here, like I was, there's kind of two paths. The one path is at some point to leave high school, maybe after grade 10 or grade 12 or something, and get a job in the local community. Maybe working for a contractor, building houses, or working in retail or something like that. So that's one path. But the other path is you had to leave.
The local population is really not that huge, and you know, pretty much every business does rely on their summer traffic.
There's 10 weeks in the summer, but you can't survive on that. It's Sunday to Thursday for 10 months, which is tough.
The community, there's two tiers to it. There's the folks that come here and see it as a tourist destination and a cottage and play area, and then there's those of us that live here and are working in that.
There isn't a lot of opportunity up here. Either you own your business, you work for Ontario Hydro, you work in health, or you work in education.
So this is the reality, and this goes on, you know, every day of every year here in Haliburton County, but you don't see it. It's not, I grew up in Toronto, and poverty looks different in Toronto, and you have folks that live on the street. We don't have that here. We've got folks that are completely socially isolated, probably don't have a vehicle, don't have access to services, and that are just doing their best to get by. You know, I've spoken to parents that wouldn't send their children to school because they didn't have lunch food and they were too ashamed as parents.
One of the first couple of years, one of the kids on my son's hockey team, mom was a road worker, flag person, and she had still, in the end of November, still hadn't received any EI. And there was not going to be Christmas in that home because Dad was on disability and there wasn't going to be. And all of a sudden the lights came on and I go, oh my goodness, like this is not just the odd family. This is the kids on the bench with my son's hockey team. For many of us, we'd be way farther ahead financially if we hadn't run all over Ontario with our kids for hockey, because it's every weekend. You're always on the go. If it's not a game, it's a tournament. And, you know, some people just can't afford that.
Kids see that it's not easy for their mums and dads. Like, it's a drive to Manvers to play Bantam hockey, and how about a 9:30 start, and then you play for an hour and a half, and you got an hour and a half drive home.
You talk about the economic hardships of a lot of the families who put their kids in hockey, and putting a kid in hockey is expensive. I remember one time, this kid was 10 years old, and he was a little tired during a Sunday 6, 7 o'clock game. And I said, geez, you know, you're a little tired. He says, well, my dad and I had to go and cut basically a truckload of wood to get gas to come down and play this game. Kid was 10 years old. Dad was sawing the wood just from the side of the road. The kid was splitting it, putting it in the back of the pickup, delivering the wood to a customer. That's how they filled up the truck to get to the game. You're talking pride. You're talking here a different approach. I don't know if there's too many AAA kids with the warm-up suits and the whole deal who did that before their game.
I would say with some confidence that Bernie Nichols would never play hockey in today's minor hockey atmosphere. His family wouldn't have fought to afford it, wouldn't have considered it, and he wouldn't have expected it. Because of the way it was set up in Haliburton, he did expect it, because every kid played.
When I was involved in president of minor hockey and whatever on the executive, we always let kids play hockey even if they didn't pay. But we never let anybody, we didn't let anybody in on the, if they couldn't, we let them play, and if they didn't have skates, we'd find a pair. We should let everybody play the game. If you're born, if you're born rich, or you're born poor, or you're born a Catholic, or you're born a Baptist, you're born that way. But when you're born poor, in that low income, you don't have the same opportunities as in today's sport because of the cost. And I find that we should let all our kids come to the hockey rink, regardless of who you are. Just make sure you come, put a pair of skates on of some kind, and get out there, because you don't know.
Yay, Cody! Woo! Yeah, I guess just early on he had such a passion for playing. Oh dear. As a lot of the boys do growing up.
See the ball? Here, I got the stick. You don't need a stick. You use your foot.
He was always writing about it in his journals in kindergarten and grade 1 about, playing in the NHL.
You think, okay, we'll take him out on the ice and within 5 minutes he'll be skating around. Well, that's if he actually wanted to learn how to skate first. He wanted to play hockey first. So we had quite a few moments of holding him, letting him pretend he was playing. And then we said, okay, stick gone. Now you got to learn how to skate.
Mrs. Forgrave said, oh, you have to miss school for a tournament. Cody said, yeah, is that going to be okay? And she said, yeah, as long as when you make it to the NHL, you get me tickets for a game. So this past winter, he was able to have Mrs. Forgrave down. She forgets even saying it. I guess she was just kind of just making a joke about it. But Cody took her seriously.
Matt, go ahead.
Holy cow, Mom! That's the best!
He would always want to be watching hockey or Sports Center or something on TV that had to do with hockey. And it was always his passion, right from the first day that he could actually love anything.
This is a sweater from the last year of the Haliburton Huskies organization, and they actually both played together on the Huskies team, so that's kind of a unique sweater.
Cody Hodgson and Matt Duchesne were born 333 days and about 10 kilometers apart. They share some of their earliest memories on the ice together with the Haliburton Huskies.
Cody Hodgson and I played together on our Tyke team in 96, 97. And
actually, one game I can remember was the finals of a tournament. We got down, it was a tie score, but we didn't get into overtime.
I think every 2 minutes it went from, 5-on-5, 4-on-4.
3-on-3, and then got down on 2-on-2. And Matt and I were the two guys put up for the 2-on-2.
And he caught a guy on a breakaway, lifted his stick, turned around, and I was coming back. And he hit me with a pass, and I went one-on-one with a guy, beat him, and then scored in overtime. We won the tournament.
We were able to pull it out, so that was a pretty cool memory of Matt and I together.
Their individual stories about becoming professional hockey players contrast the different ways you reach the NHL from a place like Haliburton. Like Ron Stackhouse and Bernie Nichols before them, it wasn't long before Matt and Cody outgrew their surroundings. It was simply time for them to move on. For one, the decision was precipitated by hockey. But for the other, it was dictated by life itself and the simple economics of the region. Cody's father, Chris, was a provincial member of parliament for the riding who divided his time between working in Toronto and getting 1, maybe 2 days a week back in Haliburton with his family.
They used to videotape the games so that I could see them on the Sundays when we were together.
I just had Charlotte, and there was a snowstorm, and I was calling around, is the game still on? And people are like, yeah, of course the game's still on. It's just a snowstorm. It's, if you canceled every game for a snowstorm up here, you'd never be traveling anywhere.
This lifestyle, dividing a work week in the city with a few scant days back in Haliburton, wouldn't last. Chris's job required him to be based in the provincial capital. The Hodgsons had to leave.
This is a tough job to be away from family, and at one point, Chris and Marie decided that for their family it was better that they, get a house down in the Toronto area, Markham as it turned out, and that's where Clayton and Cody, went with their parents.
For the Duchesnes, the situation was different. Vince and Chris both had solid employment within the area, but it was young Matt's budding hockey talent and where to take it from here that was in question. That decision would ultimately require a mammoth commitment from both Matt and the entire family.
He asked me, do you think I'll play in the NHL? I said, if you're going to, you're going to have to give up your life from the age of 14 to 18 years old. 4 years, Matt, you're going to have to give everything up. And he said, that's fine, I'll do that.
What he and his family had to do was in order to play AAA hockey, was to play for the Central Ontario Wolves, and they were headquartered out of Lindsay. And so you can imagine every practice, every game at home was at least 1 hour away.
He needed to continue to grow up here in his school, and good influential people in our lives told us it doesn't matter where he plays. If he's a talent, he'll be found. And that's all I needed to hear.
I like this area a lot. We feel like we've got roots here and really feel like both our kids do. And they would never want to move ever. I can tell you we never had the conversation. There was never a moment where we said we should move, ever.
We had an outdoor rink.
Yeah.
To uproot kids at that age, it wasn't worth it even thinking about it.
If I'm approached, and I am approached from time to time by young people and their families, I always say, stay at home, don't move, be careful, because of any number of factors that could be involved. And one of your strengths going forward will be the values that you develop.
For Matt Duchesne, his life would be about school and friends in Haliburton and thousands of miles spent on the road with his family pursuing the hockey dream. For Cody Hodgson and his family, the hockey drives would be much shorter, but a regular return to Haliburton and the place they call home would be their journey. Each would advance through the AAA rep teams in their area, inching ever closer to the dream of playing in the NHL. Athletically, they were starting to get noticed.
There's a real stability to his game, and the hockey sense he's got is elite, with and without the puck. And that's hard for a lot of players, because it's one thing to know what you're going to do with the puck, it's another thing to know innately what to do when you don't have it. And Cody Hodgson has that ability.
My son was playing high school hockey a number of years ago. I don't remember the exact year. And he went to a tournament of sorts, I think in the Peterborough area. And he came home and said, Dad, I've just seen the best hockey player I've ever seen in my life. And I played against the best hockey player I've ever seen in my life. I said, who's that? He says, write this name down, Matt Duchesne. So sometimes your kids do your scouting for you.
Life would come full circle after Duchesne was selected by the Brampton Battalion of the Ontario Hockey League in 2007. Here, he would rejoin Cody Hodgson, who had been picked by the team the previous season. The Haliburton boys were together again, this time in the big city. For Cody, the cultural transition was easy, but for Matt, it was much tougher.
I think he struggled a lot. You're in a very multicultural school, which a great experience for him, but so different from what he's used to.
I think Cody being here a year earlier helped Matt through a lot of things. There's a big cultural change living in Halliburton, having a cottage up there, and living in a big city like Toronto.
There's a big step between playing midget and then playing in the OHL, and you have to get, more mature to be able to, handle the game and the older players and stuff that goes on off the ice, that kind of thing.
It was tough for me my first year. He got to live at home in Markham, which was good for him. But I mean, for me going from here to Brampton, I mean, I went from a village of 1,500 people to a school of 2,400. It was a huge culture shock, and I talked to him a lot about it, and he helped me out with a lot of stuff, and he just kept me, positive. He's a very positive guy, so it was good.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is when they come here, they're extremely dependent on a lot of other people, whether it be their mom, their dad, their coaches, and whatever. And when you're preparing them for professional hockey, I think one of the biggest things is that, although they're 20 years old and, when most of them go to the professional hockey league, they got to be extremely independent. So it's like a 4-year program, or for some guys like Matthew, it was a 2-year program, or for Cody, it was 3, in a sense. I'm just trying to get them ready to be mature enough and be independent enough and develop those type of skills on and off the ice that they need in order to be successful in the professional game.
After an 85-point second season in Brampton, Cody Hodgson would realize a childhood dream in the spring of 2008.
At this time, the Vancouver Canucks are very proud to select from the Brampton Battalion, Cody Hodgson.
This magic role would continue on to the 2008-2009 season, where Hodgson would finish 4th in league scoring and become a first-team All-Star. He would also be named OHL and CHL Player of the Year, effectively branding him as the best player in junior hockey. Nothing would personify Hodgson's magnificent season more than the 2009 World Junior Championship in Ottawa.
That was just an exciting event. Just to be a part of it and play for Team Canada, represent the country is something I'll never forget. But then, to win and have it on home ice with my family around and friends. And
I've never been in a venue that noisy. That Ottawa arena, we were outside in the parking lot. It's really cold, and the place is vibrant. You can hear the crowd outside the arena in the parking lot with, it's unbelievable, the noise before the game, all through the game. Then, of course, after the games when they won,
The thing about Cody Hodgson is that he's just a fantastic all-around player, and he certainly was in the 2009 World Junior Championship. I thought that he should have been the MVP of that tournament, not John Tavares. He controlled things and was a penalty killer, and made all sorts of great plays. Made a terrific small play, ultimately on the goal that Eberle scored to tie it and put it into the shootout, overtime and shootout, and allowed Canada to get past Russia.
That was, really the embodiment of everything that Cody Hodgson could do. He was really good offensively. He was a huge member of that team, along with Tavares and Eberle up front. And yet there was also that defensive awareness, that responsible player who says and does all the right things.
Matt Duchene would finish 14th overall in league scoring in 2008-2009, and he and Hodgson would lead the Brampton Battalion to the OHL final. For him, though, the 2009 World Junior Tournament was a different story.
It hurt. It was an absolute dagger. It hurt a lot.
Oh, it'd be the most devastated I've ever seen him. Yeah. I think it's every kid's dream, other than the NHL, is to play on that World Junior team.
I was playing probably my best hockey in my OHL career, and I ended up separating my shoulder, and that completely set me back. I only played 1 game in 3 weeks leading up to the World Junior tryouts.
A lot of these guys, when they get cut, they've never been cut from anything. So that's a first experience.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it. I was out of shape from not skating and just was just not myself.
And again, another chance to deal with adversity, and what are you gonna choose to do from here? Because the choice was his on how he dealt with it.
When bad things happen, you got to take a look at things and you got to readdress and decide where you can get better, and that's what I did. Stan Butler always had a great saying for me. He said, you can either get better or you can get better.
It was the worst thing that could have happened and the best, because the second half of the year he was out to prove something then, and he took off in the second half of the year in Brampton. For me, I think that's why he rose to that number 3 pick in the NHL, was because he got cut from the World Juniors.
When Stamkos and Doughty and Bogosian were taken 1, 2, and 3 in 2008, there's a picture in the Hockey News every year right at the back, and it's the 3 of them with, fingers up like 1, 2, or 3 for whatever pick they were. And I said to myself, when I saw that picture. I want to be in this picture next year.
To our fans in Colorado, we are proud to select from the Brampton Battalion of the Ontario Hockey League, Matt Duchesne.
It was really fitting the night it landed on. I never got to walk across the stage and get a diploma in high school because my graduation was the same night as the NHL draft. And it was funny, all my schoolmates were walking across the stage getting their diploma, and I was in Montreal getting drafted to the NHL. And it was really fitting because that was my graduation from being a kid into adult life. And I just know that all my friends were, when they were graduating, they were kind of keeping an eye on what was going on.
Picture two. You figured it out.
I've seen this picture. This is my goal, be in this picture.
There you go.
Matt would enter the NHL straight from junior, collect 55 points in his first season, and become a finalist for the Calder Trophy, which is awarded to the league's top rookie. In 2010, he would become the youngest player in franchise history to lead his team in scoring. And on January 26, 2011, the youngest player in franchise history to reach 100 points in a career.
The oldest expression in the game is you can't coach speed. He's as fast a forward as there is in the NHL.
Actually, my favorite player in the league. I make that widely known. I just love the way he plays. I love the way he skates. I love the way he makes plays. I love how smart of a hockey player he is. I love everything about him. I mean, he's the kind of guy I want on my team.
He's a very, very special individual. Instead of going to, Florida or the Caribbean or wherever it is for 4 or 5 days, comes right back to Haliburton, goes to the high school, gets on the bus with the high school team when they're going to play. Can you imagine those kids on the high school team saying, wow, I sat beside Matt Duchesne all the way down to Lindsay or Peterborough, and that's just him.
Cody's path to the NHL took a little longer. In addition to suffering through a lingering back injury, he was also a young center on a veteran Vancouver Canucks team, deep at the center position. He would finish 7th in rookie scoring in 2011-2012 and wound up being dealt to Buffalo at the trade deadline, where he became the Sabres' #1 center.
I think Cody Hodgson is a guy who has the potential to be one of the better two-way centers in the NHL for a long, long time.
Cody is as good a defensive centerman as there is in the game. His positioning is so well, and I've commented on it, and I actually talked to Pat Quinn in the juniors that the year they won it, and Cody was a big part of it. He said he was the guy he went to all the time. He really could rely on Cody, and you can see that.
Matt Duchesne and Cody Hodgson are the new faces of the National Hockey League in Haliburton. Where this road ultimately takes them from here, of course, remains to be seen. But if history and lineage are any indication, the sky could indeed be the limit. In all of this, it would seem that getting to the NHL from Haliburton isn't nearly the impossible task it would appear to be. The precedent had already been set a few times. In this place, at least, this was nothing out of the ordinary. And therein lies possibly Haliburton's greatest hockey advantage.
Well, I think it makes you believe. If there's people in your town that actually play in the NHL, then why can't I?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, even as a kid. If you want to play in the NHL, it wasn't like it was some distant dream. It was definitely attainable, because when you look, you just go get your skate sharpened, you talk to Glenn Sharpman, he played the NHL, and later on when I got working out in the gym, I'd see Ron Stackhouse there, and I'd ask him advice, and I'd go to eat at McKechnie and talk to Walt McKechnie about hockey. So
I always told them, from the heart and what it really is like and what it takes. And I told them, I said, guys, you're here. It's like climbing a ladder. Every year you got to go up a rung. You got to get better. You got to get stronger. You got to get faster. And you got to be passionate and committed and dedicated.
If someone had said, if you're a kid in a play here in Haliburton, well, you can go to Hollywood and become a star, that would just seem so far away, it's kind of hard to imagine. But sometimes I think it's important that when you're young, you cross paths with someone who's already done it, and they look you in the eye and they say, you can do this.
There is something with the parents who can relate to their children and say, you know what, this guy grew up in Haliburton, he played in the NHL. If he can do it, you can do it. It's not just for big city boys.
The accessibility again, the small town part of it brings that. I'm not sure that if you were in Mississauga or that you'd have the same relationship with a retired professional hockey player.
Everybody knows everybody, and with everybody knowing everybody in hockey is kind of a neat thing too, and it just kind of it builds on each other. Like the kids really look up to the former NHL players, and it doesn't matter if it's a young Matt Duchene or Cody. It's an older Bernie Nichols or you know, any of Ron Stackhouse. I mean, kids don't really know who Ron is, but they know he played in the NHL, and they know that's Ron, and that's a pretty neat thing.
A lot of big things come from small towns. I think in a small town you got a lot of room to grow and dream, and that was always it for me. I just thought, you know, how cool would it be if I friggin' made the NHL, you know, from being from Halliburton.
You know, the foundation of every NHL player. You can quantify size, you can quantify speed of the puck when a guy shoots it, but it's the intangible side of the ledger that make players. And what I mean by that is the foundation that he had when he was brought up as a kid. You know, being humble, being modest, sharing the puck. Hey, we all put our kids in hockey, not because we want them to make the NHL. That might be the end result. It's the life skills that they learn, the sacrifice, the discipline, the unselfishness. And that starts at home. And if Halliburton's the place that he got that foundation, he did a pretty good job.
The minor hockey is still not influenced by parents and AAA and pressure, and the kids can develop a little slower. And I do think that in our country now they develop too quickly, and we chase kids away because of it. And when you get in a small center, there are huge advantages to be able to let kids just be kids.
When you're a small town kid, I think you develop a thicker skin, I should say, where you know, you have a drive inside you that might push you either to get out of that small town, as a lot of people want to do, or just to make the people that invested in you very, very proud. And I think that's always a trait that you see amongst the small town kids more so than the big city kids. They know the names of the people that sacrificed. They know the names of businesses that might have paid for their equipment if their parents weren't able to, you know what I mean? So there's that kind of more personal connection probably in the smaller towns.
I think their work ethic is second to none because of where they came from, the way they were brought up. Their grit and their toughness is always there, no matter if they're a skilled player or if they're just a mucker and a grinder. And also how the way they treat the game, the way they respect the game, that they don't take anything for granted. Even if they're a high-profile player, they have this humility amongst them that they're like, now I see where he came from.
I guess the one word that I hear of concern is the sense of entitlement that so many young players have today. But that's not a word that's associated, by and large, with young people coming from smaller communities. And I think there's great value and trust, you know, placed on the type of player, the type of family that player is from a smaller community.
You know, some people might think it's a disadvantage growing up in a small town. I think it's a huge advantage. There may be something in the water, but, you know, for Stan Butler, I think there's a lot more in the people.
If the old adage is in fact true that it takes a village to raise a child, would it not also be true that it takes one to raise a hockey player? From his hometown, a young athlete would adopt its characteristics, its strengths, and its inspiration. In turn, he would become a product of his environment, and through this, a true reflection of the people who come from the same place he does.
I always thought if I taught in Fenelon or taught in LCVI, what would it be like to play a Halliburton team? We're mean in a nice way.
It's funny because you did go elsewhere, whether it was, you know, Peterborough to the lift lock tournament, and like I said, you go in there with, you know, 10 or 11 guys and you're playing against 19 guys and you're victorious. And yeah, there was something about being from that small town Halliburton where these guys, you know, turned pro.
We took pride in having two lines and 4 defensemen and 1 goalie.
and playing against AA or even AAA teams and beating them our fair share of the time. And because we were relatively successful, you had 500 to 1,000 people in a rink. This is 500 to 1,000 people watching a double D town playing for an Ontario championship. And you're 10, 11, 12 years old. It was a big thing.
I can remember as an executive trying to get our minor hockey ranking stayed down to where it was when we had to go to an OMHA meeting in Richmond Hill. We had to go down there, and they said, like, you guys in Haliburton, he says, we have associations that have been 65 years in this OMHA. He said, and they don't have one banner. I said, look at your rank.
All the stats says we're the lowest income of every place in Ontario except for maybe Panatool Nile or someplace, because we used to have those stats. And I always thought, well, maybe we are, you know, but we have the spirit, and that's what keeps you going. It has nothing to do with money when it really comes down to it.
Anytime a group of people face a common adversary, they have to pull together.
Back to the early days of Haliburton, it still exists today. It's a tough place to, you know, have a business and work, and so you see people pull together, whether it's you know, the doctor's kids or the guys cutting bush and their kids. They all get together.
We are the extended family. I'm sorry, Scarborough, it's not there. It's not in Grimsby and it's not in Windsor.
So 10 guys, bring it. Like that's how we looked at it. We can beat you with our 10. It doesn't matter if we have, you know, matching socks or, you know, high-end equipment. We'll go out and, you know, play you head-to-head.
Something special about being in Haliburton. I don't know what it is, but it's when you go out there to play any game, you want to win.
I think when you come from a very small town, especially in the rugged Precambrian Shield, where it's logging and trapping, you don't really grow up thinking you can be a professor or a doctor, scientist, an astronaut. It's possible you can be, but you don't have those dreams. Many of the people don't dream beyond high school. They don't even expect to go to university. But when you live in a town where a fair number of the people whose names you know and whose faces you know play professionally hockey, then that's as much an option for you to dream about as being a trapper, as being a logger, being the mayor of the town. You can do it because Walt did it, because Bernie did it, because Cody did it. I can do it. And so inspiration is pivotal, and the inspiration is there in Haliburton, almost unlike any other community in the country.
So ultimately, what is it? What makes Haliburton special? Is it coaching? Is it the environment? A genetic anomaly? Tradition? Or is it something more? Something less tangible? Something beyond rational explanation? The following passage is from the book The Attaché, published in 1844. It reads, "You boys let out racin', yelpin', hollerin' and whoopin' like mad with pleasure, and the playground, and the game at base in the fields, or hurley on the long pond on the ice." This passage is widely recognized as the very first literary reference to hockey in Canada, and is the entire basis for Windsor, Nova Scotia's claim as the birthplace of the sport. Its author, the founding father of a small central Ontario village with an uncanny connection to a national sport, one Thomas Chandler Haliburton.
I've always felt hockey was almost invented in Haliburton.